Hi guys, Richard Blaine here. Thanks for stopping by my Easy Cooking channel and Easy Cooking blog tonight. I hope everyone had a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year, and I hope we all have a very prosperous 2012. Tonight I'm going to do another video, obviously, but tonight I'm not going to cook. Over the course of the last 3 or 4 months, I've been inundated with hundreds of emails and comments from people who want me to continue doing knife sharpening videos. Knife sharpening being one of my specialties. And so I decided with the start of the new year, I would start with a series of knife sharpening videos starting from absolute ground zero and working my way up. Okay, so over the next 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how I decide to make these modules, because there's a lot of information involved, I'm going to get fairly technical, fairly geeky and nerdy about it. It might take between 2 to 4 weeks to do all of them, but tonight I'm going to start from the ground up with knife sharpening, because naturally we're foodies, we all use knives, we might as well know how to use and maintain the tools that we have. So I hope everybody enjoys these videos. I hope everybody pays attention and leaves really good comments, and everybody that's gone to my sharpening videos, I hope you come back and watch this series. So don't worry, no Italian food for a while, no pasta. So let's get going with some knife sharpening, okay? So as usual with YouTube, 15 minutes, let's get going. I'll see you on the other side. Okay guys, so here we go with a small sampling of the kinds of stones that I use. I prefer to sharpen freehand on many different kinds of stones because there is no one way to sharpen all kinds of knives. There are many ways to sharpen a knife, okay? Now, many people have trouble sharpening knives, and one of the reasons that is so is because there's a lot of poor information out there, okay? Another reason people have a hard time sharpening knives is they have incorrect abrasives and they're not using them correctly. Obviously, if your knife is a super hard Ceramax 66 and you try using a standard Arkansas stone, you're going to have a heck of a time cutting metal. Eventually you will, but it's going to take a long time. Okay, let me just first and foremost say that there is no mystery to sharpening knives. Okay, there are lots of people out there that say this is how you do it and it's the only way you do it, and that's just BS, okay? That's not so. There are many ways of sharpening knives. There's Japanese technique, there's Western technique, there's a lapping technique, but some people say this is the way to do it and it's the only way to do it, and that's not so. There are many ways, okay? Now, I respect another kind of person that'll demonstrate how to sharpen a knife, and they'll say that this might not be the right way to do it or the perfect way to do it, but this is how I do it, and it works, and I respect those. So with this first video in the series, I'm basically going to start out talking about the edge, or how to create an edge, and what happens when you create an edge. Right now, I'm going to stick with kitchen knives, okay? Now, the issue when you're sharpening knives, okay, is you want to create a burr on the blade. Now, some people call it a wire, okay? You can call it a wire, but the fact is you want to create something called a burr, okay? So we're going to be talking about a standard French knife. We'll get into the Japanese knives later. You say you have a 50-50 grind at any angle, 40 inclusive, 20 on each side, okay? Or 50 inclusive, 25 on each side. The way you get there, okay, is to create a burr, okay? It's two separate planes, one plane, two plane, to create your primary cutting edge. So let's take a look at what that burr is going to look like. Now guys, please forgive me because by no means am I an artist. I'm going to have to hire one. But here's 3 examples of a blade, okay? Your blade is 2 planes. You have a primary profile, okay? But your edge is 2 planes that are being ground to create this primary edge, okay? When the knife is sharp, okay, and both planes have been ground, and one plane crosses over to the next, which creates this burr, and then back the other way, this is what creates your hard edge, your hard primary edge. So this is an example of a sharp knife, okay? Now, this is an example of a dull knife with a rounded edge, okay? This is very common when you're using a knife for chopping chores. This is an example of a dull knife where this edge has rolled to one side or the other. Now this edge rolling is very common in sharpening too. When you use incorrect pressure, the edge rolls. Okay, this is 3 examples, okay, of how it should look. Okay guys, here's another way of looking at it. Okay, when the primary cutting edge of your knife looks like this, okay, the trick is to remove sufficient steel from both planes, okay, to create this primary edge. When you're sharpening on this side, you create the burr here. When you sharpen on this side, you create the burr here. Eventually, when the burr is removed, you'll have a primary cutting edge here. Okay, now I told you I'm going to get a little geeky about this, and you'll have to forgive me, and once again, forgive my artwork, but here's another example. Here's your blade. Here's the round dullness, okay? Now, when you sharpen, say on this side, here, you are removing all of this metal, and it's not a lot, believe me. So when you're sharpening on this plane, you remove this metal to create this burr. When you turn the knife over and you're sharpening on this plane, you're removing this metal to create this burr. When both of these planes have crossed, you created your primary cutting edge, and all this excess rounding gets removed from the steel. I hope that makes better sense for you. Another pictorial, another great Picasso. When you sharpen your knife on this side, you grind it down far enough to create a center point and a burr. Okay, this burr will be on this side. Okay, now, when you're done with that side and you sharpen on this side, you are grinding down to get this plane to meet in the center and cross over a little bit to create this burr. Okay, once these burrs have been created on both sides, this will be your finished product. Crossover, crossover, burr removal, and then refinement and polishing, and you'll have your primary cutting edge, guys. Now, what I'm talking about in creating the burr is, doesn't matter what side of the knife you choose to work on first. The technique I'm talking about to create this burr is basically the Japanese technique of scrubbing the knife with consistent, even pressure up and down on one side until you can take your hand this way and feel the profile, and as you come to the primary cutting edge, you'll feel a wire along the top of the blade. That is, if you use this technique. Now, it is the fastest technique to get the burr, but if you're a noob at sharpening, it's also one of the hardest techniques to learn, because there are things to consider like how much pressure and wrist drift. It's the hardest thing to stop, is to get that wrist moving, doing this. The blade becomes inconsistent. So the Japanese method, this way, or even this way, is the hardest method for a new person to learn when it comes to sharpening. You want to understand that when you grind, and the grinding motion is the upward motion, you relax on the way back. Grind, relax. Grind, that is relax. What I'm talking about. Here, create the burr, flip it over, okay? Create the burr. Then there's burr removal, and then there's refinement of the blade. Guys, let me just say something about this burr that I didn't think about a minute ago. When you're working the blade this way, and we will do a knife this way, okay, there are some things that you want from the edge. As you're creating that burr from one side to the other, you want the burr to be consistent. Okay, you want it to feel a certain thickness all the way across. You want it to be visible. Okay, when you get the burr on both sides, you want to be able to feel a consistent wire. Okay, that's going to be removed. Okay, once that burr is removed, okay, and your edge is done, you want a consistent edge on your knife from the back, the heel, all the way to the point. Consistency. Doesn't matter what the angle is. Obviously, the most important part of your blade's geometry is this primary cutting edge. Okay? Okay? That's the most important part of your blade's geometry. Okay? I mean, that's why we're here. We want our knives to cut. The ideal is that you want the blade to be thin enough, as I said, at any angle, okay, but yet thick enough, and when I mean thick enough, the back bevel that supports the primary cutting edge, your back bevel, that grind that you see on knives, you want that back bevel to be thick enough to support the chore that's going to be appointed to this primary cutting edge. If that back bevel is too thin, the primary cutting edge doesn't last and the edge will roll over one side to the other, or that edge will become rounded again, okay? So a knife walks a fine line, okay? You can't use just one type of edge for all kinds of chores. It will not work. There are many different kinds of edges, many different kinds of finishes to put on a primary cutting edge for an intended chore, whether it's a kitchen knife or a fighting knife. So your knife and your knife's edge especially has to walk a fine line between strength and thickness and sharpness to thinness. And that sounds confusing, but really, as we progress in these videos, I will demystify exactly what I'm talking about. And in later videos, okay, I'm going to show you how to find the angle. Do you know what angle this knife is? I don't know what angle it is looking at it, okay? I know what angle it's supposed to be, okay? And in later parts of the video series here, I'm going to show you how to find the angle, no matter what angle it is, and that in that way, when you find that angle, you'll be able to sharpen your knife. Now, as I've stated before, working as a professional sharpener, I've used lots of belts and wheels and other mechanical devices to sharpen knives, and I do a pretty good job at it, but I prefer sharpening on the stones. Now, that being said, there are lots of rigs and jigs and guided sharpening systems that you could buy that will allow you to sharpen, that will give you a perfect bevel every time, that'll give you a lot of consistency across the length of your blade, okay? But a lot of those rigs and jigs don't really teach you how to create that back bevel that supports your primary cutting edge. They're a little bit limited, even though some of these guided systems will give you a multitude of edge angles, okay? Universally, some of those rigs and jigs are limited, some are not. But the fact of the matter is those rigs and jigs will make a good edge. Don't get me wrong. They will make a good edge. But if you really want to feel the force when it comes to knife sharpening, if you really want to feel the force, okay, then the most versatile way of doing it is freehand with a multitude of different stones and tools that will allow you the widest breadth of edge refinement and creativity that you could possibly find. Okay. You know, with hand sharpening on stones, sharpening a knife, like I said, 8,000 grit, 6,000 grit, 20,000 grit, okay, you can get to that kind of fineness with certain pastes, powders, and rouges out there. You can get up to 60,000 grit on some of the leather strops and pastes or powders that are out there. But do you really need to do that? Okay, I think in fact, I know the only knives I would want at that level of refinement would be Japanese knives. Standard Western European knives really are not created to go to those high extremes. A Western European knife, I don't think I would polish and refine to anything higher than, say, about a 3,000. Usually I just go to about 1 or 2,000, but if I wanted a little bit more, I can go to about 3 or 4. On Japanese knives, traditional cut Japanese knives, you know, I've been known to take them up to 20,000, maybe 30,000, and that's not really necessary all the time either. Okay, what it comes down to is, what do you want to do with the blade? Okay,